Now, if I had to guess, you're probably here for one of three reasons. You're about to walk into a class where The Hobbit was required reading and you did not read it, you're about to go on a date with someone who you told you read The Hobbit despite the fact that you've never read The Hobbit, or because you want to see if I'm capable of summarizing this literary classic in approximately 1/100th of the time that it took Peter Jackson to do it. Well, good news for all of you, because today I am gonna try. We're filming outside today because it is a lovely day, and not because I didn't have any blank walls large enough in my house. So without any further ado, let's start our clock now. First off, we have this guy, J.R.R. Tolkien, an Oxford scholar and author who would eventually go on to write The Lord of the Rings. But first, he told his kids a bedtime story, one that was so cool that it would be published as a novel and would change the trajectory of his career forever. And this story was all about a fella named Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo is a hobbit. Yeah? Which means that he is small, sneaky, and fond of the comforts of his home, a little place called the Shire. He's living his best homebody life when a wizard named Gandalf the Grey comes along. You see, Bilbo and Gandalf are old family friends, and since Gandalf thinks Bilbo needs to get out a little bit more, he tricks him into hosting a dinner party. This impromptu dinner party is attended by Thorin Oakenshield, a member of Dwarven royalty, and his friends Bifur, Buffer, Bombur, Dwalin, Balin, Oin, Gloin, Nori, Dori, Ori, Fili, and Kili. Do not worry about learning all those names. They are astonishingly unimportant to the narrative, despite being part of the rest of the story. The dwarves are all in a tizzy because their home, the Lonely Mountain, and all of the treasures contained within it have been captured by a big bad dragon named Smaug. The dwarves want to get their treasure back from Smaug and take back the Lonely Mountain, and in order to do that, they're going to need a burglar. Bilbo is not, in fact, technically a burglar at all, but Gandalf decides he's close enough, and they manage to convince Bilbo to come with them on the long journey to the Lonely Mountain. Along this journey, they have all sorts of easily summarized adventures, including fighting off 3 trolls, running into a guy who can turn into a bear, and being captured by both spiders and wood elves. Most importantly, though, Bilbo has a run-in with a guy named Gollum, a creepy little guy who sits around in caves going... And Gollum has this really shiny ring. This thing is incredibly important to him, and it's like the only comfort that he has in the cruel darkness of his self-imposed isolation, and so when Bilbo finds it, he just kind of slips it in his pocket and takes it with him. Gollum wants to eat Bilbo, which Bilbo's not super cool with, so they engage in a very high-stakes game of riddles in which Bilbo wins by asking Gollum the question, "What is in my pocket?" Which kind of feels like cheating, but well, nevertheless. Either way, Gollum doesn't guess what's in Bilbo's pocket, and so Bilbo is able to make it out of there alive. Along the course of this journey, Bilbo is able to prove to everyone, including himself, that he's far more competent than anyone ever gave him credit for, and he begins to gain the trust of the dwarves. That is until they actually get to the Lonely Mountain, and Bilbo breaks into Smaug's lair, as was the plan, but then not according to the plan, he steals a golden cup from Smaug's hoard, which he immediately notices and just goes off the rails. Smaug is super angry, and so he flies off to destroy the nearby civilization of Lake Town. Luckily, Smaug is actually missing a scale in one place, and a little birdie tells the Lake Town man, Bard, about it. Bard shoots Smaug with a really big arrow, and the dragon dies. Everybody's celebrating Lake Town, the dwarves have their home back, and Bilbo's realized that some adventures are worth having, and they all live happily ever after. Except that they don't do that. You see, everybody around here, including Lake Town and the nearby wood elves, knew that the Lonely Mountain was just loaded with treasure, but they didn't want to go in there because they didn't think that the treasure was worth getting killed by a dragon. But now the treasure's not being guarded by a dragon. It's only being guarded by 13 guys with beards, and 13 guys with beards are considerably less threatening than a dragon. So now the armies of Lake Town and the wood elves are going to be marching on the dwarves in order to take their treasure. And they are incidentally going to be helped out by a certain Bilbo Baggins. You see, after Smaug's death, while they were just wandering around the Lonely Mountain, Bilbo came across the Arkenstone. The Arkenstone is a really big shiny rock, and it's a super important heirloom of Thorin's family. So naturally, when Bilbo found it, he didn't give it to Thorin, he kept it for himself, and now he's giving it to the armies of Lake Town and the Wood Elves so that hopefully they can use it to negotiate a peace deal. They'll offer the dwarves the Arkenstone in exchange for a little bit of the treasure, and everyone will go home happy. Except they won't. Thorin is upset and betrayed, and retaliates by calling upon his dwarven friends, who I forgot to print a picture of. Please pretend that this is a picture of a dwarven army. But now these 2 armies are going to be facing off against these 2 armies. But honestly, now that we've got 4 armies going here, we might as well bring in a 5th. A force of evil orcs and goblins moves in to take the treasure, but luckily, all of these guys are able to band together, get over their differences, and fight back against this army. With the help of the previously mentioned guy that turns into a bear and a couple of really big birds, they are able to fight back the orcs and goblins, manage peace between all of them, them, and everybody lives happily ever after. Well, except Fili and Kili. They die. And also Thorin. He dies too. However, when Thorin is on his deathbed, Thorin and Bilbo make up, and Thorin realizes that Bilbo is just trying to help, and maybe Bilbo was right for valuing food and friends over gold. In the end, the dwarves with a new king get to reclaim their homeland, and everybody goes home pretty happy. Even Bilbo gets to return home with a little bit of loot, and in the Peace of the Shire, he writes a book that will become The Hobbit. And then they live happily ever after. Well, except for that darn ring. And that was The Hobbit. In 5 minutes or less, I really hope. It's a fantastic story, and although it's not 5 minutes, it's a pretty quick read that I would truly recommend to anyone from children to those of us that are still children at heart. Please do all of the engagement things if you enjoyed this video, like liking it, subscribing, checking out my Patreon, which is linked in the description, and commenting which details from The Hobbit you would have included in this video. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope that you have a very happy Hobbity day.